What makes a commander deck dank? Is it the art and lore of the commander? Is it the synergy and playstyle? Or is it the personal enjoyment you get out of the deck? The answers to these questions are yes, but the real question is your commander in your dream blunt rotation? I know my commander is. He even be summoning up fire-breathing toads to light up the Zaza while he tells us all about the good old days roaming around Southeast Asia and Naruto running with the greats. Today, I am going to be talking about the legendary OG himself, Tatsunari Toad Rider, and how you can use him in Commander to rain down the Frogocalypse upon your foes. Part 1. The Inspiration. Tatsunari is inspired off of two major toad magicians of lore. First, Tenjiku Tokubei, born 1612, died 1692, was a Japanese adventurer and writer of the early 17th century. He traveled to Southeast and South Asia, hence his Tenjiku, East Asian name of India, nickname. Tenjiku Tokubei became a popular character of kabuki and jorori puppet dramas, where he was given the role of a magician. He was a popular subject of woodcut prints in the 18th and 19th centuries. He was often depicted using toad magic to summon and ride fire-breathing toads, and is likely the inspiration for the folktale of an old dude named Jiraiya. Yup, that's right, we are going Naruto mode, bish. Jiraiya, the famous toad-riding ninja from the hit anime Naruto, is actually Jiraiya, literally Young Thunder, originally known as Ogata Shuma Hirioki, the toad-riding protagonist of the Japanese folktale Kadekuichi Kiden Jiraiya Monogatari. Excuse my pronunciations on all these. The tale of the gallant Jiraiya. He has many woodcut prints as well. Check him out saving that frog and literally blowing that snake's head off with a giant gun. You gotta love the Japanese. Both of these figures are the inspiration for Tatsunari Toad Rider. Tatsunari summons a legendary frog token, Kami, which he can then ride to become unblockable by all creatures without flying or reach, and he also makes Kami unblockable in the same way. Furthermore, his magic enchantments in conjunction with Kami will drain the whole table and keep you topped off on life. These abilities, as well as Tatsunari and Kami's art, are inspired by Jiraiya and Tenjiku's toad magic. Tatsunari played correctly will result in draining the table to death, swinging massive unblockable frog damage to seal the victory, massive enchantment-based value that is difficult to remove, or most often a combination of all three. You can build Tatsunari as Frog Tribal, Enchantress, Aristocrats, or Drain, among other deck identities. This build I would consider Enchantress primarily, with a second focus on duplicating Kami with morphs to enhance the Drain. Part 2. Why the hell is this deck named Cinnamon Toad Crunch? The basic play pattern of the deck is to play Tatsunari and then play an enchantment. This begins the frog summoning with one Kami. Any enchantment you now play will let Kami spew fire like the frogs of Tenjiku's lore and drain the table for 1 damage. However, if you so happen to morph Kami first with a morph creature and place the morph on top of Kami, a few interesting things happen. First of all, Kami will no longer be a frog and cannot be made unblockable with Tatsunari's ability. Wah. Second, you will now be able to create a new Kami when casting an enchantment. Whoopee! Third, every Kami created will still have the original token effect of draining opponents for life every time an enchantment is cast. This means during the average game you will likely have at least 2 Kamis on board, if not 3. I call morphing Kami baking, as we have baked Kami into a new creature and kept the benefits of the original Kami. The enchantments are the cinnamon, the morphing and copying is the baking, and the screams of despair of your opponents as they are slowly pinged 1 life at a time to death are the satisfying crunch. Hence this deck is aptly named Cinnamon Toad Crunch. The deck works fine with just 1 Kami if you don't draw one of the 8 Kami morph enablers. And also, Glasspool Mimic will let you copy any Kami that has already been morphed into something non-legendary. So this adds another copy effect for when we have a baked Kami on board. Vesuvian Duplimancy also dupes Kami, but we will talk about that bad boy, bad girls, bad harem later. Some notes. Chaining multiple cheap enchantments to drain opponents will be referred to as a Kami drain combo and doesn't have to involve using all of our mana and cards as fast as possible. It's most advantageous to retain some cards in hand in case of a board wipe to rebuild if we are off to a good start and can afford to not dump our hand. Also, I wouldn't worry too much about people removing Tatsunari early. He's not immediately threatening, and it's likely someone else at the table will be the initial arch enemy if there is one. Part 3. Expand the Swamp, aka our ramp. Keeping our ramp as enchantments when possible will synergize with the rest of the deck. Therefore, instead of running every Nature's Lore and Cultivate effect, we will use Fertile Ground. This is good mana fixing. Wild Growth, simple clean green ramp. Bare Umbra, a buff, protection, and massive ramp in one card, one of the standouts of the deck. Carpet of Flowers. At least one mana off this turn is a win. Sometimes it goes big mode against mono blue or decks with a lot of islands. Sanctum Weaver. This mana dork gets huge quick. Mark of Sakiko. This is 1 green mana positive the first turn. Every turn after is free value. One with Nature. This is a cheaper rampant growth that will recur itself. Pretty broken. Morph ramp options. Here we got Parcel Beast. Mostly here for the cheap morph cost, but not a bad way to spend an extra mana if you got it. Migratory Greathorn. Basically a rampant growth effect for 1 more mana while setting up for future Kami copies. And then we have some creature ramp options. We have Herald of the Pantheon. Makes cheaper enchantments and gives us more life for whenever we inevitably cast Hatred. This at 2 mana is a steal. We got Poison Dart Frog. He's a mana dork frog with Reach Death Toucher in case of emergencies, and he's just super cute and is a frog. And then we have the Gitrog, Ravenous Ride. So what's great about this is you basically get easy Kamis to saddle this guy to sack them for ramps and draws. It gets pretty cracked. Part 4. Enchantments go brrr. Card advantage. Again, keeping our draw effects tied to enchantments when possible is best. So how do we accomplish this? Auras and card draw and combat damage are the main avenues. I will also include our draw payoffs in this section as they can make up for our low source of 8 card advantage cards to some degree. We can expect to get 1 draw off of our auras, the combat damage ones, and most likely at least 2. And by draw payoffs, I mean cards like the Enchantress cards that draw on enchantment casts. So we have aura card advantage. Flight of Fancy. Draws 2 cards and gives something flying, solid. Combat Research. Best on Tatsunari for the Ward 1 and the +1/+1, as well as drawing cards after evasive damage. Nerd Rage. Draw 2 cards with upside. Usually we won't see the +10/+10 come into effect, but if we do, whoosh, that's a one big frog. Snake Umbra. Totem Armor is huge here. Creature card advantage. We have Sea Dasher Octopus. This operates similarly to Combat Research, but enables a Kami morph. Again, we have Gitrog, Ravenous Ride. Yeah, cheap Kami sack fodder is good. Other card advantage, we have Curse of Verbosity. This is great. You slap it on the arch enemy and watch the cards roll in. Font of Fortunes. What's nice about this is it can be recurred with Boneyard Lurker and is also a good way to hold up mana for a counterspell without wasting it. And then our Enchantress cards that draw. We have Argothian Enchantress, so an Enchantress with the Shroud, solid. Eidolon of Blossoms. This will draw on itself and also counts as an enchantment, so really good there. Enchantress's Presence. This is also an enchantment, which is nice. Entity Tracker. This is cool because you can flash it in, so if you're holding up mana, not a bad use of it. Then we have Setessan Champion, and let me tell you, if This card is not removed, it will become a problem in this deck, so solid pick there. And Verduran Enchantress, this is the most basic Enchantress, but it's still good. I'm also going to bring up the card Abundance here, as this isn't going to draw extra cards for us, but the cards we draw will be much better for us. This basically ensures a win with an Omniscience and some draw power on board. Otherwise, it's just going to help us eliminate any dead draws by only drawing us lands when we want to. Part 5. Punish the City Dwellers. Removal. Once again, we use enchantments when possible. The frog effects are great for removing commanders also, as it won't kill them outright. So we have Frogify, perfect taming here, and great removal. Amphibian Downpour, basically Frogify with Storm. What we do have to consider here is this is one of only 2 multi-target removals we have in the deck, so value it as such. Then we have Doom Woke Giant. He gives -1/-1 counters, which kills indestructible creatures also as a nice bonus. Also, being as woke as he is, this guy is definitely not racist, which is a plus. Then we have Eaten by Piranhas. Frogify with Flash, yes please. Kenrith's Transformation replaces itself and gives a 3/3 with no abilities. Then we have Unable to Scream, cheaper Frogify that also stops any Morph Disguise play if it ever comes up. Utter Insignificance, instant speed Frogify with the option to exile if needed. Yes, I know the card says Utter, not Udder, but this GIF is funny, so I'm gonna do it anyway. Then we have Witness Protection, cheaper Frogify with a funny legitimate business person token. It's actually hilarious when you make your friend's big commander a legitimate business person. Seal of Primordium. This is a 2-mana artifact enchantment hate piece. It's also another Boneyard Lurker recursion target. And then we have land slot removal. Demolition Field, targeted land destruction that only uses a land slot, scavenger grounds, exile all graveyards if needed for the low cost of a land slot, and sink into stupor, instant speed bounce, or counter an expensive spell, all slapped on a land. These are pretty generic and I throw them in most of my decks as they're just great. Now we also have a morph removal piece in Gem Razor. This allows morphing for more Kamis and its targeted enchantment and artifact removal. It also gives trample and reach to the morph target, so that's good too. Part 6. Don't touch my frogs. Interaction. Any effects that prevent our opponents from interacting with our board, casting spells, or using their own resources optimally, I'm going to include here. So, interaction enchantments, we have Alpha Authority, hexproof plus evasion. Aspect of Mongoose, essentially hexproof that will redraw itself on a board wipe. Bear Umbra again, this card is goated here. Canopy Cover, hexproof plus evasion. Combat Research, the Ward 1 does come up occasionally. Eel Umbra, instant speed totem armor. I know I haven't had a pun in a minute, just eel with it. Oh. Then we have Snake Umbra for totem armor and Destiny Spinner. This is basically counterspell protection for most of our deck. Also, it has land pump upside. Then we have Curse of Verbosity. The card draw means people will prefer to swing at our opponents. It's going to play well with the fact that we can easily get a 3/3 frog as a chump blocker anyway, so people are really incentivized to swing elsewhere. Then we have Propaganda. This significantly slows down token decks, and we can use this in Curse of Verbosity almost like semi-board wipes and hope they buy us enough time to enact our game plan. Then we have Revenge of Ravens, added drain that disincentivizes your opponents from attacking you. And we have a couple other interaction spells. We have the OG counter spell because it's just good. And again, Sink into Stupor. Land slots are so OP. Part 7. Ushering in the new era of Toad. Our win cons. Number 1, we have Omniscience Enchantment Chaining. If we are ever able to get Omniscience on board, it is likely a game over. I know it's a pretty brain dead statement to make for any decks, but I think it's funny in this deck, especially if we have 2 or more of the mini Enchantress effects, like Argothian Enchantress or Eidolon of Blossoms, and hand are on the board. We can just start chaining enchantments, drawing tons of cards, and keep playing more enchantments for free. Abundance, again, is also worth mentioning here, as it will eliminate the dead draws. And special note, Omniscience will not pay for Tatsunari or any card's mana ability, just the cost to cast it. So the more you know. Secondly, as a win con, we have commander damage. Self-explanatory. Hatred and Tatsunari's ability is easily capable of eliminating a player instantly, and the life gain from Kami means we can usually afford to pay the health cost we need. Defense of the Heart deserves an honorable mention here, as if you have a protection spell ready, you can use it to protect a Yargle in Multani that's summoned off of Defense of the Heart, and next turn it will be ready to do 18 evasive damage plus whatever Tatsunari is swinging for. That's often enough to eliminate someone in one combat at the midpoint of the game. Then we have Vesuvian Duplimancy and Shark Typhoon as kind of value piece win cons. So Vesuvian Duplimancy is the ultimate drain value engine here for us. Technically, if we get it to stick, we can make as many Kamis as we want with cheap targeted enchantments, and we will put our opponents on roughly like a 3-turn clock, including the turn we play it. This is less of a win con in itself, but it kind of deserves to be mentioned here, as it will definitely force a board wipe at the very least, if we do already have a board going. Shark Typhoon is not quite as potent, but will also demand answers from the table, as an army of flying sharks, however small, will put in damage or be utilized as cheap chump blockers. So going back to Vesuvian Duplimancy, let's do some math. With Vesuvian Duplimancy and Tatsunari on board with nothing else, let's cast enchantment spells. The first enchantment spell, targeting Tatsunari or just a generic enchantment, will create a non-legendary copy of Tatsunari, or if it wasn't targeted, it won't do anything, and this won't matter, and will make the legendary Kami token. Now, casting the second enchantment spell targeting Kami, both Tatsus won't trigger as a legendary Kami exists, will drain 1 from everyone, will create a non-legendary Kami token, and deal 3 total damage and heal for 1 point, essentially. Now, when we cast the third enchantment spell targeting Kami, again, the Tatsus don't trigger as we have Kami. We'll drain 2 from everyone, create a third Kami token, which is a second that's non-legendary, and we'll have dealt 9 total damage to the table and done 3 points of healing. And if we cast a fourth enchantment spell targeting Kami, we'll drain 3 more from everyone, create a fourth Kami token, which is the third that is non-legendary, and including the rest, this is 18 total damage and 6 total heal. That's a lot of words. Is this any good? Technically, for Commander, if you kill through non-commander damage, you must deal 120 damage spread across 3 foes while not losing 40 life. Let's ignore life gain decks for the moment, as we have the potential to deal with them through commander damage and stuff like Hatred. Assuming everyone deals equal damage to each other, this won't happen exactly, but as the law of averages, this will kind of work out. You and 2 of your opponents need to collectively deal 40 damage to the other opponent. 40 divided by 3 is 13.3 repeating, which we can round up to 14 damage. This is our responsibility to deal to our 3 opponents. On the other hand, your 3 opponents collectively each need to do 14 damage to you to knock you out of the game. Theoretically, having Vesuvian Duplimancy and Tatsu survive to play 4 enchantments is a very possible biggish turn, and an almost certainty over 2 turns. This will result in 18 total damage and 6 heal, so we have dealt 18 out of 120, or 15% of the damage we need total by ourselves, and gained 6 divided by 40, or 15% of our total starting life. So in 1 turn, possibly spending only 4 to 6 mana, best case, as we have some 1 mana enchants, we can deal 6 damage to each opponent. This is roughly 43% of our 14 damage responsibility to the table. Also, we healed for 6, which, each of our opponents will have to deal 2 additional damage to kill us. At the very least, this easily makes up for some shock lands or pain land usage. So that was a lot of math to say on a very middle of the road turn. Having Tattoo and Vesuvan Duplimancy on board will result in 18 total damage and 6 healing. Actually, this is not correct. These are just the incidental benefits. Consider having 2 extra mana to pay for Tatsunari's unblockable damage, and we are getting at least 6 more damage through, and every benefit from all the enchantments we casted is honestly the real focus that we need to include here. So how many enchantments would we need to cast just to win the game on the spot, incidentally with the drain damage in a normal game? Here's the math. Total cumulative damage is D, number of enchantments is Y. So 9 enchantments should do it, and 10 will do it if there is a bit of healing. With 9 enchantments doing 108 total damage, or 36 damage per player, and 10 enchantments dealing 135 damage, or 45 damage per player. This is a lot of enchantments, but if we have any draw engines on board with this, it's easily attainable over 2 turns, possibly 1 big turn if we have some of our ramp package deployed. I think the math here is right, but if it's not, someone correct me and I'm a big stupid idiot. With the focus on enchantments and morph, what happens if we mutate a little bit with Vesuvan Duplimancy? In the end, there are far better ways to win the game by casting 10 spells in a turn. In fact, there are 2 card combos that will win you the game if unanswered. Looking at you, Niv-Mizzet and Curiosity. So it's not like this value engine is particularly great. And that's exactly why we are doing it. We want to beat our opponents by bonking them on the head with frogs and sucking them so dry they die of dehydration. Part 8. Not frogs that assist the frogocalypse. Everything else that we have not talked about. One of the great things about this deck is it is very synergistic, so I'm not going to bring up anything we already covered in the other sections, just the more dedicated pieces we haven't seen yet. First, we have Copiers. Last Pool Mimic. Worst case a land, best case you copy a morphed Kami for more drain. Note, you must have morphed Kami, or copying the legendary token will instantly remove itself due to the legend rule. You have been warned. Then we have Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief. She won't copy Kami, but she will gain every targeted enchantment you want her to that you cast as an incidentally copied aura token. This can stack up for mad value. Second, we have the Morphers. These are going to allow us to make more Kamis and have other powerful effects. We have Boneyard Lurker, which we talked about a little bit. This guy allows us to recur permanents like Font of Fortunes and Seal of Primordium. Then we have Dreamtail Heron. This will give flying and draw a card whenever this creature mutates, including the time that we cast it for its mutate cost. Usually we're not going to want to double mutate on top of it to draw more cards, but it's worth considering occasionally. Then we have Insatiable Hemophage. This gives Death Touch and drains the table for each mutate. And we have Otrimi the Ever Playful. This is a 6/6 with trample that will recur any mutate creatures that have fallen. They hate to see you remutate that dirty Boneyard Lurker again later. The rest of the mutators we already talked about in the ramp and removal sections. Third, we have the Drain Your Opponent's Sacks section. Here we have Grim Guardian. This is more damage for our enemies on every enchantment. It's also an enchantment himself. And we have Revenge of Ravens that we brought up briefly. This de-incentivizes token decks to go after you, and it's nice incidental drain. Fourth, we have the Don't Touch My Frog section, aka Evasion. This is mostly cheap enchantments to make our frogs evasive. We have Launch, which recurs itself on creature death and gives flying. Rancor, which recurs itself on creature death and gives trample and +2/+0. And Shimmering Wings, which will give flying, and we can return it to our hand for 1 blue. We can easily chain enchantments for 2 total mana with this effect. Now for a couple of weird cards, we have Whip Silk. This is basically exactly like Shimmering Wings, but instead of giving flying, it gives our creatures reach, and it returns to hand for 1 green and it costs green. So it's not as good, but it's still great for chaining enchantments. And lastly, we have the big ol' beat stick, Yargle in Multani. This is a frog, so we can make it evasive with Tatsunari for the lulz. And then we got some dank lands. Altogether, there are 42 different enchantments, including creatures in this deck to trigger Tatsunari and Kami's abilities, so in other words, we are stacked. No artifacts or sorceries here. Who the hell needs those anyway? Part 9. How to play Frogger. General play pattern notes. Our curve is pretty freaking sweet. The average mana value of our main deck is 2.97 without lands, so it's not too bogged down with any big drops besides Omniscience. However, it is worth considering to hold early game plays like Ramp sometimes for after we play Tatsunari. Basically, we can kind of trade Ramp for Kami triggers or vice versa, so ramping early is still probably the best bet if we have card draw to replace it, but if not, we might sandbag to get more enchantment triggers later. My meta doesn't include a ton of enchantment removal or board wipes for enchantments, but if it did, I would prioritize my hexproof and protection spells for the targeted hate as needed instead of using them to keep a Kami Drain combo going. Usually, you're going to want to swing at opponents that cannot deal with our unblockable frogs to benefit from combat research effects. There should be at least one player without flyers, but we have other evasion spells if needed. Our protection spells are pretty strong, as threat assessment is really tough to perform on this deck. If they remove Tatsunari, we can just cast them on later with our Great Ramp. If they remove Kami, we'll just make another one. And if they remove an Enchantress draw piece, that's likely the best choice. We should attempt to use our protection spells to prevent that. So against specific deck types, for Battlecruiser and Voltron, we can just enchant their big stuff with our many Frogify effects and laugh at them. Against token decks, we use Evasion to get our frogs by, and Propaganda and Revenge of Ravens to stay safe. Defense of the Heart does work here, tutoring up Sanctum Weaver for ramp, any Enchantress for draw, or Yargle and Multani to crash out. Against Infect or Death Touchers, we can often just sacrifice our Kami for free blocks before making another one. Against Control, we should be the aggressor and utilize unblockable commander damage or Yargle and Multani here. Watch out for board wipes and don't overextend. If they return our enchantments to hand, that is just more value for us, so we mostly have to worry about exile effects. Against Spellslinger, we should be able to use a protection selectively against single target removal, and again, watch out for those board wipes, don't overextend. Our Drain should prevent us from being the easy target here by keeping us a little more topped off on life, and take advantage of their low creature counts and swing in for damage. Against life gain decks, we should focus on commander damage wins with Hatred and unblockable Tatsunari. And against other enchantment decks, we should lean on our drain effects and evasive damage to get the edge, as they can draw a lot of cards like us, but they probably can't do the same kind of incidental or sneaky commander damage as often as we do. This deck usually pops off in the mid game with our ramp, so if you can get a Bear Umber to stick, you will basically be doubling everyone else's mana. It's often a great path to victory. Bear Umbra with a couple other ramp pieces can easily bring an Omniscience down like turn 6 or 7, which is backbreaking for the rest of the table. Like most of my decks, this is firmly in bracket 3, as it will dunk on precons, but it's nowhere near CEDH, as sometimes we just hang out like a chill guy for the first turn or two. General weaknesses of the deck would be mass enchantment removal, its low amount of board wipes, and the fact that we need Enchantress effects on board to draw through our deck. I believe these weaknesses are more than made up by the deck's strengths, namely its strong ramp, tons of cheap protection for our value generators, easily accessible evasive damage, and of course the fact that once the Omniscience engine is on board, it's basically game over. I've had games where Setessan Champion became a 14-16. I've had games where Tatsunari unblockable commander damage won the game. I've had games where the Drain enabled us to outlast our opponents, and I've had games where the Omniscience engine took over and dominated the table. It's a pretty varied deck, and I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do. And of course, I'm sure there's many decks that auto win with Omniscience even faster, but that's not the point here. We just kind of use it as a generic win con here that's super fun and trolly to start draining people with the little enchantments you cast off of it. And that's it. I want to give a special shout out to Aya MTG, as this channel was heavily inspired by his videos. So if you haven't checked him out, head on straight over to his channel for more dank content. Also, check out my deck on Moxfield. A lot of this info is ripped straight from the primer, but there are some other juicy tidbits in there, so be sure to check it out if you're going to build Tatsu. Look in the considering section to see other applicable cards, and feel free to comment if you see any that should be included. I've spent a lot of time refining the list, but I'm happy to defend my choices as well as be enlightened if there are any winners that would be worth including. Last time I checked, there are about 130 cards in the considering section, so those can be a great starting point if you want to build a deck with a different focus. Lastly, thanks everyone for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe so I know people out there are watching these dank shit posts, and I'll be encouraged to make more of them. Peace. See you later.